end, before the sky learned how to burn, before the world forgot its own weight, there was a place where the ground still held. The earth was firm beneath heavy feet, not cracked, not trembling, not yet afraid. In that place, at the edge of a wide plain bordered by ancient trees, something massive moved with slow certainty. Each step pressed meaning into the soil. Each breath stirred the tall grass. The air itself seemed to part out of respect, as if it understood that this was not just an animal moving through the world, but a presence. The horns came first, curved, worn, scarred by seasons no one remembered anymore. They did not point forward in anger. They pointed forward in warning. Behind them, a great frill rose like a shield carved by time, marked by old scratches, faded lines where something once struck and failed. This Triceratops was old enough to know the signs, the way birds went silent before danger, the way the wind shifted when something was wrong, the way the ground sometimes carried a message upward through bone and muscle. But tonight, the earth was calm. The sky above held its color, deepening blues fading slowly into black. No fire, no ash, no falling stars, just a quiet moment between breaths when the world pretends it will last forever. The Triceratops locked near a low rise in the land. From here, the plain could be watched. From here, nothing approached unseen. The Triceratops stood still for a long while, not frozen, not resting, listening. The night cooled the plates along its spine. The scars across its frill tightened as the air grew sharp. Each breath left its chest slowly, measured, controlled. This body had carried weight for many seasons, not just flesh and bone, but memory. The memory of pushing forward when others fled. The memory of holding ground while the world tested resolve. The memory of impact. Long ago, something had struck the frill with force enough to crack sound itself. The scar remained. The lessons. The plain looked empty. But it never was. Beyond the tall grass, smaller shapes moved cautiously. Horned shadows kept their distance. Beaked forms fed in loose circles. All of them knew what stood on the rise. Not by name, by presence. The Triceratops did not lead them, did not guard them by choice. It simply existed in a way that made danger hesitate. Predators passed wide around this place. They always had. Because where the Triceratops stood, the cost was too high. Tonight, the plain felt wider than usual. The Triceratops did not move. Movement wasted strength. Stillness conserved it. If something came, it would come fast. If something changed, it would change suddenly. Better to be ready. The muscles along the neck tightened slightly. The horns angled forward, not in threat, but in preparation. Far away, a low sound rolled across the land. Not a roar, not thunder. Something deeper. The plain answered with silence. The Triceratops did not move. Above, the stars looked different, not brighter, not dimmer. Wrong. They flickered unevenly, as if seen through disturbed air. The Triceratops lifted its gaze. It had watched the sky its whole life. It knew its patterns, its rhythms. Tonight, the sky did not follow its rules. A faint glow touched the horizon, too distant to fear, too strange to ignore. Deep inside, something stirred. Not panic, recognition. The kind that does not come from experience, but inheritance. A warning carried through generations that had survived and passed the message on. The world can change in a single breath. The Triceratops lowered its head again. Stand, hold, endure. That was the way. At the edge of the plain, smaller creatures shifted uneasily. Some drifted toward the forest, others froze. Instincts argued. The Triceratops noticed but did not follow. Running scattered the herd, standing anchored it. If danger came, this was where it would meet it. The ground trembled once, very faint. almost imagined. The tremor came again, stronger this time, enough to ripple the grass, enough to travel up through bone and settle behind the eyes. The Triceratops exhaled slowly. The sky's glow deepened. Just a little. The world was still holding, but not as tightly as before. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, something immense had already begun to fall. The tremor did not return right away. That was the strange part. The world often warned in patterns: storm before rain, silence before attack, wind before cold. But this came without rhythm. The Triceratops remained where it was, muscles coiled beneath layers of thick hide, breath slow and deep, each inhale measured as if the air itself might run out. The ground beneath its feet felt different now, not broken, not collapsing, aware, as if the earth had begun listening too. The rise where it stood had always been solid. A place chosen by instinct long before memory. A place where generations had stood facing outward, watching the same horizons. That instinct whispered again now. Not loudly, not urgently, but with a pressure that settled behind the eyes. Something had shifted far away, too distant to see, too large to ignore. The Triceratops lowered its head slightly, horns angling forward, not in challenge, but in alignment with the land itself. The grass around its feet stirred, not from wind, but from something moving beneath the surface. A slow traveling force, a message passing through stone. This was not an enemy that could be faced. Not teeth, not claws. This was the kind of danger that did not care where you stood. And yet, the Triceratops stood anyway. Because standing was not about victory. It was about presence. About being there when the world decided what would remain. Far across the plain, a bird lifted suddenly into the air, its wings cutting sharp lines through the dark. Another followed. Then another. The sky swallowed them quickly. The Triceratops watched until they were gone. Then it looked back to the horizon, where the faint glow now pulsed. Not brighter, not closer, but heavier. As if the night itself had gained weight. The ground answered again, this time with certainty. And for the first time, the Triceratops understood. The world was no longer asking. The night deepened. Not darker, but thicker. Sound moved differently now. The small noises of the plain no longer traveled far. Each rustle seemed to fall straight down, as if the air refused to carry it. The Triceratops shifted its weight once, slowly, carefully, testing the ground as one might test ice. It held, but it did not feel the same. There was a tension beneath the surface, a quiet resistance, as though the land itself was bracing. 15. The great animal had stood through storms before, through shaking rains and screaming winds, through nights when lightning split the sky open and stitched it back together again. This was different. There was no violence yet, no force demanding reaction, only waiting. And waiting, the Triceratops knew, was often the hardest part. Its chest rose and fell, each breath steady, each heartbeat slow but powerful. A deep rhythm that matched the earth's own pulse. Somewhere in the distance, a long, low sound rose. The Triceratops felt it in its skull now. A dull pressure, not painful, but insistent. A reminder. The world had begun counting down, and all that could be done was to stand still between one heartbeat and the next. 18. The plain did not empty all at once. It never did. Fear moved in waves, not floods. At first, only the smallest shapes withdrew, quick bodies slipping into grass, vanishing between shadows without sound. Then larger forms followed, heavy steps moving carefully, choosing distance over certainty. The Triceratops watched them go, not with judgment, not with concern. Each creature carried its own knowing, its own threshold for staying. This one's threshold was different. It had learned, long ago, that turning away did not always mean survival. That distance did not always protect. Sometimes, the safest place was exactly where danger expected resistance. The ground trembled again, longer this time. A slow rolling motion that traveled beneath the feet and did not stop when it should have. Dust lifted in a thin veil, hanging in the air longer than before, refusing to settle. The Triceratops felt the vibration travel up its legs, through joints shaped by centuries of standing firm, into the bruise. The frill caught the movement and held it, absorbing the message, spreading it across scarred surfaces that had been built for impact. The sky answered with silence. No thunder, no wind, just a distant glow, now wider than before, as if the horizon itself had begun to burn from behind. The Triceratops lowered its head another fraction. Not in fear, in readiness. The world was changing its posture, and the Triceratops, ancient and unmoving, matched it, waiting to see what would come next. The stars dimmed one by one, not vanishing, but fading, as if something unseen were passing in front of them, slowly, deliberately. The Triceratops noticed. It always noticed. Its eyes were not built for detail, but for movement, for change, for the subtle shifts that meant everything when time was short. The glow on the horizon had spread now, no longer a point, but a thin band of color pressing upward, turning the edge of the sky a bruised orange. 22. Still no sound came with it. That was wrong. Even the greatest storms announced themselves. Even predators gave warning in scent or vibration. This thing moved without asking. The air grew heavier, pressing down against the broad back and thick neck, making each breath feel deliberate, earned. The Triceratops inhaled deeply anyway. The smell had changed again. Not ash, not yet, but something sharp and metallic, like stone struck too hard. The ground answered with another tremor, strong enough this time to loosen pebbles from the rise, sending them skittering. Strong enough this time to loosen pebbles from the rise, sending them skittering softly downhill. The Triceratops did not step back, its feet spread slightly, toes digging deeper into soil that had known their weight for years. This was what the body was built for. Not speed, not escape. Endurance. Above, the sky seemed to stretch, as if pulled taut from one horizon to the other, waiting. And beneath it all, standing between Earth and whatever came next, the Triceratops remained, a silent wall holding its place as the world drew closer to its breaking point, strong enough this time to loosen pebbles from the rise, sending them skittering softly downhill. The Triceratops had stood like this before. Not on this night, not under this sky, but in moments when the world pressed forward, testing whether bone and will would give way. There had been predators once, large ones, that circled just beyond reach, waiting for hesitation. There had been clashes where horns met flesh, where the sound of impact echoed across the plain and carried for miles. Those moments lived in the scars now, not as pain, but as proof. Proof that standing had meaning. The ground shuddered again, a deeper movement this time, rolling beneath the surface like a distant wave. It did not crack, it did not split, but it did not feel endless anymore. The Triceratops flexed its neck slowly, the heavy frill shifting with a low creak of bone and muscle. Dust fell from its edges in fine lines, marking time in silence. The air tasted dry. Dry in a way that stole moisture from the mouth, that made breathing feel exposed. Somewhere far away, a tree fell. Not. The sound reached the Triceratops late, arriving dull and distant, stripped of urgency by the thickening air. The glow at the horizon pulsed once more, brighter now, wide enough to reflect faintly off the curve of the horns. Still, the Triceratops did not move, because running would not stop what was coming, and standing, even if it changed nothing, meant facing the world as it was. Unbroken, unbowed, holding the ground until the ground itself chose otherwise. The ground no longer felt level, not visibly, not enough to see, but enough to feel. A subtle shift passed beneath the Triceratops' feet, as if the plane itself were tilting, slowly surrendering its balance to something greater. The animal adjusted without stepping back, muscles tightening, stance widening, just enough to compensate. This body knew how to adapt without retreating. The grass around the rise bent in uneven directions, not to wind, but to vibration, each blade responding a moment too late. The Triceratops lifted its head higher now, frill catching the dim glow of the sky, casting a wide, broken shadow behind it. The shadow stretched farther than before. The horizon no longer held its shape. The distant line wavered, blurring as heat began to ripple through the air. Still no sound came from the sky, only from the earth. A deep, drawn-out groan rose from beneath the plane, not sharp, not violent, but tired. As if the land had been holding something for too long and had finally begun to give. The Triceratops exhaled slowly. This was not an enemy to be driven back, not a force to be challenged. This was the world itself, shifting its weight. And the Triceratops, ancient and unmoving, leaned with it, not away, but into the moment, holding fast as long as holding was still possible. The first sound from the sky arrived late, not loud, not sudden, a distant tearing noise, as if something immense were being pulled apart far above, slowly, reluctantly. The Triceratops raised its head fully now. The glow at the horizon had changed color again. No longer orange, no longer soft. It burned pale, unnatural, flat, like light without warmth. The air vibrated faintly, not enough to shake the ground, but enough to rattle deep inside the skull where balance lived. The Triceratops braced. Muscles tightened along the shoulders. The heavy frill angled forward, ready to absorb whatever came. Another tremor followed, stronger than the last, rolling beneath the plane like a held breath finally released. The grass flattened in waves. Dust rose in sheets, clouding the lower air until the ground itself seemed to disappear. The air thickened all at once, not gradually, not gently. It pressed down with sudden weight, as if the sky had leaned closer to the ground, closing the space between them. The Triceratops felt it in the chest first, a resistance against the lungs, a reminder that breathing itself could become work. The pale light along the horizon widened, spilling upward in a slow, terrible arc. It did not flicker now. It held steady, unblinking. The ground shuddered beneath the rise, not in rolling waves this time, but in sharp, uneven jolts that snapped through stone and soil alike. The Triceratops spread its stance further, toes digging deep, muscles locking into place with practiced certainty. This was not fear. This was preparation distilled into instinct. Dust swirled around the great body, clinging to scarred hide and heavy frill, coating the world in muted grey. The sound from the sky returned, louder now, a continuous tearing that did not stop, did not fade. The Triceratops lowered its head fully, horns aimed toward the glow, not to challenge it, but to meet it. Because if the world was about to break, then it would break against something that refused to move. For one long heartbeat, everything held. Then the light surged, and the distance between sky and earth began to disappear. The light did not fall. It expanded. A white force spread across the sky, faster than sound, faster than thought, washing over the plain like a second dawn that had no intention of bringing warmth. The Triceratops felt the heat a moment later, a sudden pressure against hide and bone, not burning yet, but overwhelming. The ground convulsed beneath its feet. Not shaking, breaking rhythm. Stone shifted. Soil loosened. The rise that had stood firm for generations lost its certainty in an instant. The Triceratops dug in harder, muscles straining, horns steady, frill angled forward as the shock wave reached the land. Air slammed into the grey body, a wall of force that pressed furrows into the grass and flattened everything smaller than will. Dust and debris rose together, turning the world into a churning grey void where distance no longer existed. Sound arrived last. A thunderous roar tore across the plain, deep and endless, as if the sky itself were collapsing inward. The Triceratops held, not because it believed. The sound faded first, not suddenly, not completely. It thinned, stretching out into a low, endless roar that seemed to sink into the ground itself and stay there. The light followed. It did not vanish. It withdrew, slowly peeling back from the sky until color returned in broken pieces. Grey. Then darker grey. Then something like night. The plain was no longer a plain. The air hung thick with ash and dust, so dense it swallowed distance and pressed against every breath. The Triceratops stood where it had always stood. But the ground beneath it had changed. What was once firm now shifted subtly, rolling underfoot as if unsure of its own shape. Cracks ran through the soil in jagged lines, opening and closing with faint aftershocks that traveled endlessly beneath the surface. The great body rose and fell with slow effort. Each breath burned. Each exhale carried heat away into the dark. The frill, once marked only by old scars, was now coated in fine ash, its edges glowing faintly where heat still. Dust drifting downward, grain by grain, as the world tried to remember what still existed. The Triceratops lowered its head at last. Not in defeat, in exhaustion. It had stood through the breaking of the sky, through the collapse of certainty, through a moment no living thing had ever prepared for. And though the world had changed beyond recognition, one truth remained. Something had endured long enough to witness the silence that followed. The night closed in again. Not the night of before, but a heavier one. And beneath it, the Triceratops breathed on, standing in a world that no longer knew how to hold itself. Time no longer moved the way it once had. There was no clear moment between then and now, no clean line separating past from present. Only darkness layered upon darkness, each moment settling into the next. The ash continued to fall, soft at first, almost gentle. It drifted down through the heavy air and settled across the Triceratops' back, collecting in the curves of the frill, filling the shallow lines where old scars lay. The ground beneath its feet cooled slowly, releasing faint wisps of heat that curled upward and vanished. Breathing remained difficult. The air scraped the throat. Each inhale felt thinner than the last. Still, the Triceratops did not collapse. It shifted its weight once, a small adjustment, just enough to remain balanced in a world that no longer sat still. Somewhere far beyond sight, the earth continued to move. Low, distant rumbles passed beneath the surface, not violent, but constant. A reminder that the breaking was not finished. The Triceratops closed its eyes briefly, not in sleep, but in focus. The body knew how to endure darkness. It had done so many times before. But this darkness was different. This was not the absence of light. It was the presence of something new. A world reshaped, quieted, waiting to decide what would remain. When the Triceratops opened its eyes again, nothing had changed. And that, more than anything, told it the truth. The night was not passing. It was settling in. The horizon was gone. Not hidden, not obscured. Gone. Where the plain once stretched outward in familiar lines, there was now only distance without shape. A grey expanse that swallowed depth and returned nothing in return. The Triceratops lifted its head slowly, ash sliding from the frill in thin streams that vanished before touching the ground. Its eyes searched for landmarks. The rise, the trees, the distant curve of land it had known for years. None answered. The air carried no direction now. No breeze to speak of east or west. No scent to hint at movement. Only stillness. The ground beneath its feet shifted again, not violently, but persistently, as if the land were slowly rearranging itself beneath the weight of what had fallen from the sky. The Triceratops adjusted its stance, every movement deliberate, each step measured to avoid sudden collapse. The world had become uncertain, not dangerous in the way predators were dangerous, but unstable, unreliable, unfamiliar. Ash continued to fall, thickening the layer already coating the plain. It dulled sound, softened impact, made every step quieter than it should have been. The Triceratops listened anyway. It always listened. But the world no longer spoke in clear signals. Only a low, constant hush remained, the sound of a planet settling into something new. And standing alone in that reshaped silence, the Triceratops waited, not knowing what the next moment would bring, only that it would come slowly. Because now, even time had begun to. The darkness did not lift. It softened. Slowly, almost respectfully, as if the world itself were careful not to disturb what had endured. The ash fall eased at last, thinning into a faint drift that no longer hid everything it touched. Shapes began to suggest themselves again, not clearly, but enough to exist. The Triceratops still stood. Its body was coated in grey now, its outline blurred against the ruined plain, as though it had begun to merge with the land it had guarded for so long. Breathing came shallow, each rise of the chest smaller than before, but steady. Still steady. The heat had faded into a deep, aching cold. The ground beneath its feet had settled into something new. No longer the earth it remembered, but solid enough to hold one last weight. There were no sounds of life nearby. No calls, no movement. Only the quiet presence of a world waiting to see what would rise again. The Triceratops lowered its head gently, not in surrender, but in rest. It had stood when standing mattered. It had faced the sky when the sky came down. It had remained long enough to witness what followed. And in that final stillness, as ash clung to ancient bone and the night wrapped itself around everything that was left, the Triceratops became part of the land's memory. A silent wall, a final shape of endurance, marking the place where the old world ended and something unknowable began.